Welcome everyone to our December VOREC Steering Committee meeting. We've extended a half an hour today to make sure we have time to cover year-end review. Today is all about reflection and thinking forward, which is one of my favorite things to do at the end of the year. And it's been a big year, so I'm excited to dig in with you all. We are a smaller group today. Jeff and Fraser let me know that they're unable to make it, and Eva is joining, but she's going to be a little late because she's doing kid pickup or drop off. Sorry, it's too early for pickup. So she'll be joining in a little bit, and we're going to cover a few things today. We're going to get started with welcome and introductions. We haven't done it in a while, but I'm going to have all the steering committee members go around and say your name and organization. Like I said, today is about review and reflection. I'm going to share a year in review presentation, a brief presentation about VOREC's work this year. And then we're going to jump into a round robin discussion. And I shared some prompts with you all. I'll share them again when we get to that part of the agenda. And then we're going to start to wrap up around 11:45. We have some program updates we want to make sure you're looped in on. And then for anyone listening in who's not on the steering committee, we'll open it up for any comments from you before we adjourn at around 12 p.m. today. Sound good? Any questions from anyone? All right, great. So let's do some quick introductions. I'll go ahead and call on the folks who are here, and please just share your name and organization when I call on you. All right, we'll start with Becca.
Hi, I think I know everybody. Becca Washburn, Director of Lands Administration and Recreation, and the VOREC Steering Committee Chair. Thanks.
Heather.
Hey everybody, Heather Pelham, Commissioner, Department of Tourism and Marketing, Vice Chair of VOREC. Great to see everybody today.
Shelby. If you can come off mute. Okay, we'll move on and come back to Shelby. Carrie. Oh, sorry, Carrie's not actually here. We just have her note taker. Sarah.
Morning, everybody. I'm Sarah Pelkey. I'm the Community Development Director for the Town of Poultney, the Economic Development at-large appointee for the VOREC Steering Committee.
Thanks, Sarah. Abby.
Hi, everyone. Abby Long from the Northeast Kingdom Collaborative, and I serve as one of the Vermont Trails and Greenway Council seats on the VOREC committee.
Great. And Carrie, I called on you, but your note taker was just here. It was right before you jumped on. So would you go ahead and introduce yourself with your name and organization?
Of course, Carrie Thomas, Northern Forest Canoe Trail Steering Committee member, I think at large, but representing paddling for sure, and waterways.
Awesome. All right, so we also have a couple of partners from organizations we work with listening or participating today. So I'll go ahead and call on you all to introduce yourselves as well. And I'll start with Claire.
Hi, everyone. Claire Pulfis. I work with Becca and Jackie in the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation as the Recreation Program Manager.
Kelly.
Hello, everyone. Kelly Alt, Executive Director of the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance. Great to see you.
And we do have Elizabeth joining us. I wanted to give, Elizabeth is listening in, but I wanted to give her the chance to introduce herself as well. Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Hi there. Elizabeth Nance. I'm a grant programs manager with the Department of Economic Development. So we sort of support outdoor rec projects.
All right, thank you all. All right, so I'm going to move us quickly ahead to the year in review presentation. And I'm going to share my screen, so just give me a moment to get that going. right, so you all should be able to see my slide, not my notes. Is that accurate? Okay, seeing some head nods. Fantastic. All right, so it was a pleasure to create this presentation this year. I'm really excited to share this with you all. It's giving me a bit of deja vu because I remember last year in the month of December when we were doing our year in review meeting, and I said, wow, it's been such a big year. We've accomplished so much. And I really feel like this year is not all of that different. At the start of this year, I remember sharing when we met in February that I felt like we had built this launch pad and that we were about to take off. And that the foundation document or the foundation we built with Move Forward Together Vermont and our foundation document was really going to give us some clear messages and a more coordinated process for going about our work, and also diving into some more directed projects. And while I still feel like we're adjusting and improving in many ways, I'm also really excited about all of the work that we've done this year, and that a lot of the conversation we had in February and the new guidance documents we have are really making an impact for me as the program manager, but I also hope for you all as steering committee members, whether that's our testimony on Outdoor Recreation Day, tabling, or networking with partners at various outdoor recreation focused events this year. So I hope you notice that too. I popped a couple of photos on this slide that I really loved. The one on the left is a networking event that VOBA hosted this past summer, bringing together outdoor equity partners. The middle photo is our tabling setup at the Gear Makers Festival. This was back in the spring in Montpelier. And then on the right, it's a photo of Commissioner Danny Fisco speaking at our Outdoor Recreation Day press conference. So just a couple of highlights. So at the beginning of this year, going back to February again, and our work plan meeting where we started this year, we discussed what was in that work plan. And if you remember, I broke the projects we were talking about into a few buckets. Those buckets were base program work, which was operational work to coordinate and move the program forward. Core projects, which we said were projects where the VOREC program manager, my role, and capacity, or where my role and capacity has been committing or is committing time. And then we also had this third bucket for special initiatives or projects to add to the pipeline of core project work that could be taken on with additional time and capacity. We didn't really add anything to the special initiatives bucket, so I'm not going to report out on that today, but I just wanted to provide a reminder that that is a bucket of work that we're tracking. I also wanted to provide a quick reminder about our foundation document and the different impact areas that we identified to do work in. I think as I go through this report out, you're going to note where those impact areas are coming up. And when you look at sort of the outcomes of this year. So those impact areas are data that identifies needs, gaps, and assess the information and to assess and assets, to inform decisions. Policy that optimizes Vermont's outdoor recreation economy. Funding that's sufficient, flexible, and sustainable. Technical assistance that facilitates the availability of services to provide relevant topic and process expertise. And storytelling that helps communities, partners, and individuals understand their collective contributions to outdoor economy in Vermont. All right, so this slide is a quick report out by the numbers of the work that we achieved this year under the base program work bucket. So as a reminder, this bucket included program operations like organizing and supporting the steering committee, administration support for our Northern Border Regional Commission funding, participation in regional and national meetings like the Confluence of States, and engagement during the legislative session. So you can see some highlights on this slide that include Outdoor Recreation Day. We showed that photo of Danny Fitzko at the beginning. There were a lot of planning meetings that went into that day, so I've called that out in the numbers highlights. I also developed and shared with you legislative session updates. That was about 14 emails that I sent to you throughout the legislative session. We also held Capitol for a day in the town of Rockingham to highlight the Wyndham region's connection to outdoor recreation economy, and you can see a photo of that on the top right. It was a really beautiful day in the town of Rockingham. And you can also see photos of like our in-person steering committee meeting and our bi-monthly business meetings. Just one additional highlight that I think is pretty cool. I, along with a staff person from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, got to attend a roundtable discussion with the National Governors Association. That conversation was focused on public health and outdoor recreation. That was back in the summer, and I'm really excited that they're going to be publishing a policy brief to governors on public health and outdoor recreation, and that's anticipated to come out before the end of the year. So just a cool outcome of some of the work that we did under the base program work. I think it's also important to remember that as we were doing our program operations and supporting you during the legislative session, there were some really major shifts happening at the federal level this year. I pulled out some of the news article headlines that I tracked on this slide as a reminder of, the things that we were feeling on the ground in the state of Vermont as these shifts were happening. And in response to those shifts, we attempted to lend some support. It's what's been happening is challenging and impactful for a lot of people on the ground level, but VOREC did publish a memo articulating the impacts of federal decisions on groups like state agency partners, trail conservation and health organizations, landowners and land managers, and town and regional planners. This was in addition to a memo that the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance published, which focused on outdoor industry and a number of other impacts that those groups were facing. I shared this memo with all of you. I also shared it with our agency partners, as well as some regional and national partners like the Northern Border Regional Commission and the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. So just a couple of ways that we lent support this year as those shifts were happening. And certainly the impacts of those shifts are still going on and very real for a lot of people. I also wanted to highlight the great work our partners did this year with funding through VOREC from the Northern Border Regional Commission. You'll see on the top left a photo of another networking series that VOBA led. This was an outdoor innovation panel, and that series concluded with the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economy Summit. That innovation panel, if you're interested, was recorded. I included a link on this slide, so you're welcome. I'll share these slides out after the meeting. You're welcome to go watch that if you missed that. It was a great conversation we had. The photo below that is of the Vermont Recreation and Parks Association, and they held a series of events for parks and recreation professionals, as well as used funding to help with their planning for the Vermont Conference on Parks, Trails, and Recreation. So you can see a photo of some folks getting together on a ropes course there. And then we also funded the Vermont Mountain Bike Association, who worked with Richmond Mountain Trails to complete a series of 3 video tutorials on how to build adaptive mountain bike trails. And those videos covered topics from an intro and overview to building adaptive mountain bike trails to building descending and climbing trails. And all of those videos are posted on the Best Day Ever YouTube channel. And I've also included a link here if you want to wait for the slides to give those videos a watch if you're interested. All right, so that brings me to our core program work. So this slide shows you a quick report out by the numbers of our work under this bucket this year. As a reminder, this bucket included work on the local level outdoor recreation economy project. That project was led by the Department of Tourism and Marketing. I participated and led from the sort of content expertise perspective. And the result of this process is the Vermont Core Toolkit, which we're really excited about. And really the intention of this work was to begin generating data at the local level to fill in the gaps in the national data we get from the BEA every year. We're really excited about the Vermont Core Toolkit, and we're working towards a launch of that content in early 2026. This bucket also included our work on the implementation of Move Forward Together Vermont, which we did a launch webinar for back in March. The implementation this year really focused on awareness building and preparing for implementation, but we did a couple of implementation sessions in alignment with the Vermont Conference on Parks, Trails, and Recreation, as well as the Vermont Outdoor Economy Summit in November, to collect stakeholder input on a suite of proposed projects. And that data that we collected will inform the VOREC action plan, which is being worked on right now, and you'll hear more about in February. So you can see some number highlights on the slide. Hopefully you've been looking at those, but just to point out some things to you, on the right, you can see some photos, and there's a great photo of a pilot community site visit we did with the City of Virgins. That was for the local level outdoor recreation economy project with the Department of Tourism and Marketing. And on the right is a photo from the Gear Makers Festival that we sponsored. And you can see a snapshot of our launch webinar for the Move Forward Together Vermont, as well as a screenshot of the Vermont Core Toolkit, a little sneak peek at that platform. I also wanted to highlight here the VOREC Community Grants Program. Although we weren't just actively running a round of applications this year, we were supporting current grantees. And I checked in with Lauren Pyle, who's our Recreation Grants Program Manager, and she was able to share some numbers with me about the progress we've been making on active grants. And I wanted to share that with you because this is still a really big core part of our work, supporting these communities who are implementing these projects on the ground. In total, we've funded 85 grants and over $11 million in funding. 34 grants closed on December 9th, which is pretty significant, and 24 more grants will be closing by the end of the year. 27 grants have also extended to 2026. So this year has really been big. We've been watching a lot of ribbon cuttings happening on these projects, and I know some of you got to go and actually participate in some of those events. I've been really impressed, at least by the photos. I haven't gotten to attend as many as I would have loved to, but in the photos, I'm seeing communities coming out to support these ribbon cuttings and talking about these projects. There's every time a ribbon cutting happens, there's a press release that goes out. And I look for those press releases, and it's amazing to read them and see the value of these projects for communities. Really makes us feel good, and to see communities celebrating these projects. I'll also say that Claire and Lauren put a lot of work into collecting stories from communities that have received VOREC community grants this year. And reading those stories, it's really clear that these projects are making a difference on the ground in these communities. And you can see from the map on the right where those projects are happening. And it really is in all 14 counties of the state. And so just reflecting that funding is making a big impact on the ground. And you can see some photos on the right from some of those projects that I dropped in this slide. I also just wanted to highlight quickly for you, just so you get a little sneak peek into some of the work, the Danville train station project. I think some of you will remember that when we did the first press conference, or the press conference for the first $5 million we received from the legislature, it was a big deal. And we held the press conference at the Danville train station. The governor came to speak. There was the Danville train station was at capacity, maybe even more than we really should have had there in terms of people. And there's just a lot of excitement in the room. So the Danville train station project closed this year, and I wanted to share with you some of the results of that project. You can see some photos from the open house that was held in September on the right. You can tell a lot of people coming out really excited about the work there. In total, there were 150 people who attended that event. They're anticipating once the Danville train station is open, or when it's open, that they're going to have on-site vendors. And I don't know if Eva has joined the call yet, but it will include the Lamoille Valley bike tours and Rocky's New York style hot dogs there for folks biking on the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail to stop in, and community members. The renovation of the Danville train station includes photographs from the railroad days in Danville, their original heating stove, and the bell from the 1885 train wreck, so the bell from the train that was in the train wreck. And they're figuring out staffing, but the plan is for the Danville train station to be staffed by volunteers. So the opening hours will depend on those volunteers and how many the town can recruit. All right, so that wraps up sort of the year in review. I did want to provide you quickly with a look ahead before we jump into our round robin conversation. The VOREC steering committee. So the first meeting I'm looking at is, and actually I realized that February 16th, I think, is President's Day. So it probably won't be that day. But we do need to determine a first meeting day. I'm planning for that to be in Montpelier, probably the second or third week of February. And I'm planning to put bi-monthly meetings on calendars for the second Friday of the month, as we did this year. And I'm planning to get those calendar holds out to you before the end of the year. We're also in February going to be looking at and talking about the VOREC action plan and thinking about our work plan for the year ahead. The VOREC core toolkit, like I said, we're planning for a launch in early 2026. So you'll be hearing more about that. And then, of course, we're already getting started for the 2026 legislative session. And hopefully you are aware, but in case you haven't gotten the update on Outdoor Recreation Day, it has been scheduled for February 5th this year, which I believe is a Thursday. All right, so I'm going to end this and stop sharing. It's good to see all your faces. Welcome, Eva. Yeah, and open it up for our discussion. So what we're going to do right now is jump into hearing from all of you. And I sent you a couple of prompts ahead of this meeting, and those were to share one major accomplishment from your organization and partners this year, as well as to share reflections on any changes on any changes we should consider heading into 2026. I know it can be really challenging to think about that second question, and what VOREC has done this year, what changes we might want to make. And to help you all think about that, I think, there are things that we can think about around like our cadence of meetings. Did the cadence of meetings work for you this year? Was the meeting content helpful for you? Did you come away with information that you found helpful? Did you feel like when you were in meetings, you were providing feedback to VOREC that was useful and you saw implemented? Communications between meetings, did we communicate with you adequately? Or are there things you want us to communicate to you between meetings more? So I'm going to open it up to the floor and have you all chime in. I also want you, as you're listening to others and sharing your own ideas, if it sparks ideas for you, I did create a feedback form. And I know it's challenging outside of meetings to fill these things in, so I'm just going to drop it in the chat. If you would prefer to share something over there, you can. And with that, I'm going to open it up, and it's going to be round robin. So please chime in when you're ready. And this is going to be for steering committee members primarily, and folks who aren't in the steering committee. I just ask that you listen in. Abby, are you volunteering?
Sure. I don't like silence, so I might as well jump in. Well, I'm representing a new organization. That was a big change this year, but still thrilled that through the NEK Collaborative, I'm able to still participate in this committee because I actually think it fits even more so with my role. I can look beyond Kingdom Trails as there's like so much incredible recreation up types and different places for recreation up in the kingdom. But a major accomplishment from the new organization I'm representing is we put on a huge conference, a gathering called NEK Together, just right before the Thanksgiving holiday. It was a time for legislators, both federal and state levels, state employees, community leaders, business, nonprofit leaders, just anybody to get together. And it's like the one time out of the year where folks from the NEK get together to focus solely on the NEK. So pretty special. And not only was it an opportunity to just press the reset button on the NEK Collaborative and remind people the power that it has as a neutral convener and holds the MOU with USDA Rural Development for special extra priority funding that comes down from USDA for just the kingdom. But it was also an opportunity to solicit some feedback from those leaders. So they were asked a couple questions, and basically resoundingly the major regional concerns as we enter into the new year are housing, of course, healthcare affordability, but also flood and climate resilience is up there in the top. But what's trumping all of those is major concerns for the shift in federal funding landscape that we're all kind of experiencing in one way or another. So I think that kind of leads me into the second question, which is changes we would consider heading into 2026. Jackie, you just shared in that presentation about the VOREC grant funding, and I think there's no time like today and going forward to advocating and hopefully still being able to have that type of state appropriation funding because there's not going to be potentially not going to be other layers, higher layers of funding coming down. So it will be even more crucial.
Thanks, Abby.
Yeah.
I could go next if nobody else wants to jump in. I think that I want to focus both my 2025 and my 2026 accomplishment and looking forward on the work we've done around accessibility. And it's thanks to a VOREC grant to the VTGC and the Trail Accessibility Hub. You know, this project was a big, hairy idea that came together a few years ago, and we've been working hard on it. And, you know, there's been a ton of assessments done. There's been a ton of information and resources shared. But from the NFCT perspective, we, of course, did all of our assessments. And now we're in the process of trying to fund the implementation of the recommendations we made. But what we also realized, and that, you know, we didn't really anticipate as we were putting this grant together, that we have a ton of information now that we can share regardless of any improvements we've made. We are starting to develop suggested trips, which we've always had on our website and which we can share with Trailfinder, and taking all of the detailed information that we got out of those assessments and putting them into the suggested trips. So it kind of talks about an experience you can have, and then it has a little icon, you know, waterway accessibility icon that takes you to a PDF that describes in, you know, agonizing detail how many feet it is from the parking lot. Is there a place for people who need accessible parking? What's the slope and the camber to get to the waterway? Are there lips that you have to go over? So we're just excited that this is sort of an unanticipated result of all of the work that we did. We expected to be able to do a lot of work out of this to improve access in a physical manner, but it's giving us a ton of information that we can share, which we've discovered through this process is just as important as doing the actual physical improvements. Not that we're not pursuing the physical improvements, but I'm just really excited about being able to share that information. And so from the second perspective, if there's anything, I have to agree with Abby in terms of what VOREC really needs to attempt to do. We started something really big here, creating this excitement around outdoor recreation in the state of Vermont. We've got all this attention from various towns and communities and organizations that are improving outdoor recreation and thinking about it as an economic driver. We had huge grant rounds, which we all knew were not going to continue to be huge. But I think we really need to work as hard as we can to get funding together so that communities can feel like, oh, we didn't just do all this work for nothing. We're going to have the support of the state of Vermont behind us, and our communities are going to be able to continue to implement these things that we've been envisioning. And without you know, another round of VOREC funding or something like it, it's going to kind of feel like everybody got stuffed in the corner after getting really excited. So that's what I feel like we need to do.
Just building on that, Carrie, I think you're making such a good point about the impact that we've been able to build over a few years of funding. And then each of the stories that have been collected that Jackie was referring to earlier in her update, in a lot of ways, we also saw it at the VOPA Summit with Newport talking about how they might not have been able to unlock other funding opportunities without the VOREC grant, really positioning them to have a fundable idea and concept. So it's wonderful to have the team that Lauren leads collecting stories and data, the interactive map that Claire provided a link to. These are all things that we've been able to do to further tell stories about the impact of the work. And I think maybe just to help bring in another voice. That was one element in particular that Fraser shared. She wasn't able to be here today. She's solo bombing. But she did share that she feels like the more storytelling we can do associated with the impact of those grants, the better. That was one of her suggestions. So very consistent with what you guys have been saying.
I can go next if we are ready to. Oh, sorry, there's a question. Okay. So
Shelby, sorry, Sarah, to interrupt you. Shelby, did you have a question related to
I guess
Becca's?
maybe I will interject just because it's more with that prior topic theme. I'm not going to give a full readout on the prompt question. I was curious if the year in review content, Jackie, you just went over there, with respect to the community grant programs, is likely to be like populating what goes to the legislature in terms of report outs, and if they're, or like what, and maybe you can circle back to this, but like what that communication plan is. The one nugget that seemed a little missing to me is that leverage story with other funding, and I don't know if that's in the baseline data that was collected, but that might be really valuable, and I'm sure there are other things too. So over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, well, and I would, sorry to interrupt you, Sarah, but I would point to folks like the town of Poultney and the town of Newport, and we're at this point aware of, I know I put it on that slide, but I didn't highlight it, that we did review 9 applications for the next round of the rural economy, recreation economy for rural communities program, and the town of Johnson and the town of Newport just received that assistance. They both received VOREC community grants. And so I think we can look to examples like that, and certainly Sarah's experience to reflect those kinds of opportunities that the grants have unlocked. And sorry, Sarah, go ahead. I just wanted to add that thought. And oh, Becca,
No worries.
you're muted.
Thank you.
I was just going to respond to, yes. Yeah, can totally hear you, Sarah.
Go ahead, Becca. Did you have a response?
I did. I'm sorry. I should be over like muting and talking, but we're just going to do that forever. I just thought it would be helpful to know. And again, this kind of tracks back to some of the comments that Fraser made in her written feedback to us. It's like, how are we talking about this and sharing these impacts? And one of the things that members of the FPR staff in particular have been able to do. I don't know what it looks like on your end, Heather, but we submit weekly updates that make their way through Danny's office, our commissioner, the secretary, and then up to the governor. And we consistently are profiling the impacts of the work that we're doing, as well as the challenges that the community is facing. So we have been able to kind of slow drip throughout the course of the year information about how valuable this is, and hope that that will influence or inform as people debate the budget for FY27 and consider whether there are resources available to reinvigorate the grant program. And then with the testimony to the legislature, Danny has the opportunity to do that in both the appropriations committees and is well supplied with stories and slides that will help her make that case. And then in other instances where we're invited, like last year, to make presentations just generally on the impact of the work, we have the opportunity to do that through our communities committees of jurisdiction, but also economic development has had us in, which has been great. Sorry, Sarah. I think I'm finally done.
No worries. Thank you. So, well, and thank you. I think for my quick update, I want to work backwards because I'm excited about this topic and this conversation where it's heading. And I'm also trying to really keep a municipal perspective in sharing with the VOREC committee. But I think, in one of the changes or one of the things that looking forward to for 2026, I circled stakeholder representation and really marketing. Because I think the conversation has very recently in this community turned towards marketing and promotion. And I'm not sure, how aware others are regarding outdoor rec development in Poultney, but there's been a real effort led primarily by our trail organization to consider the appropriate timing of marketing and development for this community and the impacts that it would have. And, to borrow a line from a mentor I had, you make sure there is a there before you begin doing these types of things, because we had some early marketing efforts where, we attracted people to the community, but we weren't quite ready to have maybe a complete visitor experience that would invite people back. So I think, that's a really important point for us right now, is that we feel like we're at that point where we do have a there. And I think the state of Vermont is also at that point where there's a very, very quality, robust outdoor recreation opportunities and experiences in the state. And so I think we're really focusing on marketing and promotion. And the thing that I want to keep top of mind, and some of the things that I'm hearing from other communities, and Jackie mentioned the RERC, the new cohort, is that stakeholder representation and making sure that we are inviting the right stakeholders to the table for all sorts of different planning or development of marketing plans and things of that nature, because that is a question that we sometimes get in Poultney from other communities. Who are the right people to help guide these technical assistance programs, and how do we invite them? How do we interest them in that? So this is an excellent conversation, and thank you for opening it up. And then I'll go to the other two that were the other two prompts. I think the big accomplishment for Poultney in the past year is really having an implementation grant from the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, having the opportunity to, consider nationwide what's happening in outdoor recreation development from that perspective, and just being linked up with that organization. But locally, the project was a visioning project, and it gave us the opportunity to consider a site that could be redeveloped for a higher use, a site that's on the Poultney River. And so there's a lot of natural resources considerations there as well. So we did wrap up the grant. We do have conceptual designs that haven't been presented yet, but and I think we've perhaps have more questions than answers at this point, but it did really open up the conversation about what are we doing next in this community, and how we can consider some novel ideas. And then I think, and the other thing I wanted to highlight too, Jackie mentioned, was the Core Toolkit pilot project. I think that, for us, that information that will be derived from that tool and from participating in the pilot project has been incredible. We're already finding different ways to use that information to help storytelling. So thanks, folks. That's my update.
If maybe I could jump in,
Go ahead,
just,
Heather.
I mean, so much that you're talking about like really kind of dovetails with our work, and great to hear you guys are thinking about, marketing, but what's the right time of that? I love the there. I've heard that phrase before too. So like, let's definitely stay in contact about that, because, from our perspective, Department of Tourism, it's always like, we want to be able to amplify what's happening on the local level, but we want to do it at a time and a way that makes the most sense. I can remember a time when, we were told, please stop telling people about this trail network. We have no parking and we have no bathrooms. So we don't want to make that mistake, even though we have this, strategic objective to kind of to distribute people around the state, and make sure that, we can maximize the impact of visitation for our communities. But am I allowed to comment on the two questions, Jackie? Sorry.
Of course you are.
Okay, so I
Go
wasn't
ahead.
sure if that comes later. Or not. Well, it's just this really dovetails, I guess, to a little bit of kind of what Carrie was saying about like it's what we've accomplished and what I'm looking forward to at the same time. We've just wrapped up our strategic planning process for a destination management plan for the state. And a lot of the things that you were kind of touching on, Sarah, are in there, from, what is the Vermont visitor experience? Are we providing that? Are we, like I mentioned, spreading people out geographically? But do we also have, like a visitor code of conduct so that we are talking about responsible tourism and visitation? How do we think about like off-peak visitation? How can we help facilitate that? And, kind of the mix between destination development and destination marketing and what's the right time and the right place for different things. So again, really resonated with me, but that's a huge accomplishment for us. That's been a year in the making, to bring all that together. We're just thinking now about what does, implementation or rolling that out look like. And so we're going to be for the next year thinking about how do we bring that to different communities, much like we did when we had listening sessions in last winter to understand what should inform the plan. How can we not only share what we see from the Department of Tourism as sort of like our vision going forward, but where does that dovetail with other organizations? And, how do we kind of achieve that collective impact? Because there are action steps that we've identified for ourselves, but there's lots of things that we can't do. It's not that we're the right person, but we can maybe advocate or advance the conversation or, be that convener. And that's really where we've been kind of focusing on what does that look like? What do we do with this plan? So hopefully many of those on the call will be able to join us when we come to a town near you kind of thing in the next year. But excited about both where we've come and where we're going with that work. That's my update.
Heather, I remember you went like to 8 different parts of the state or 16 different parts of the state in 7 days or something like that.
It was 10 and it was quick. Yeah.
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 It's
It
awesome.
was great.
Great to hear that it's going to pay off with an awesome plan that you guys can use as your North Star.
Yeah, and I mean it mentions Move Forward Together Vermont, right? Like we're really trying to like leverage other folks, what they're thinking. We're not doing this in a vacuum in any way, or at least we're attempting not to. And I will just say, I guess maybe the last thing is, we were wrapping up a lot of the projects that we were able to fund with our EDA money, and that includes just, whether it's kind of asset creation and marketing, creative, but also a lot of brand research that we've been able to do. We have just our final project is actually to create a visitation brand for Vermont. We've never actually had our own brand. We've only been part of the state, state government. So the logo that we use is the same that tax uses and corrections. And, I mean, granted, mostly for a local audience there, but, we're really excited that we are in this process that will have, a lot of engagement as well to actually have a brand mark that can help kind of just propel everything else that we're doing. We don't expect clearly a design mark to like carry the state, but it will just help us do what we do, hopefully a little bit better. So that's kind of exciting coming up as well.
Thanks, Heather. I think we haven't heard from Eva or Shelby yet.
I'm happy to go next. Oh, unless you're ready, Shelby. But yeah, just to touch on a follow-up on that work grant, that's one thing I wanted to mention today that I'm proud of accomplishing. I did participate with community members in the interview and the application process to secure that grant from the EPA. And so that was really exciting and a great accomplishment. As well as, on a personal business level, our shuttle service this year was a big success, and that was a touchy endeavor with all the state flooding that we've had, all the rail trail flooding that we've had for the first 2 years that the rail trail was supposed to be complete. So I feel like this was the first year the Moyle Valley Rail Trail was actually open, for the full trail. And we had an incredibly successful shuttle season, which just lets me know, gauging the future of what we have. If this was the first year, and this is how, the visitation that we got, and this was a successful endeavor, I know it's only going to grow. And the projections for the future are very optimistic. That's, I guess, our biggest accomplishment this year with the adversity we've dealt with flooding and those related challenges. This was also my first year as a steering committee member. So we're kind of wrapping it up here. And so learning about this, steering committees, it's a little different from a for-profit perspective, and how to navigate my role in this committee. So, one thought I had with potential changes, and I think this would segue into one of our next topics, is future steering committee members, and maybe focusing on getting more voices at the table from for-profit businesses and more folks in my perspective, just for a broader perspective all around, and different kinds of input might be something to focus on in 2026. And again, I know we're recruiting at the moment, and about to discuss that. So that was kind of something that I thought would be helpful for this committee, and just to have a little more broader perspective from who's at the table. And so, yeah, but I'm looking forward to it. I really appreciated being invited to the steering committee, and I'm still getting my bearings.
Takes at least a year, I think. And we really appreciate you.
I'm still getting
we
my
have an
bearings
update.
as well, Eva. So
I'm sure. I
Listen.
figured.
We also
I'm
have an
happy
update on recruitment stuff that I'll share a little later, but Shelby, please go ahead.
Great. Okay. In no particularly organized way, I'll just touch on a couple of things which will be far from comprehensive, but we were at TPL really delighted to be a part of one of the ribbon cuttings on the community grant program, funding for a trail system at the Wolcott Community Forest, also, kind of connectivity into the LVRT. I think, I can't overstate how extraordinary it was to see one of our kind of ostensibly conservation projects be activated so early in the tenure of the community's stewardship of new public land, and to have that just activate so quickly was pretty profound. Usually it takes, if there isn't already a trail system, it can take years to do that. So it was like I'm eager to continue telling that story over and over again. Not to mention just how heartwarming kind of seeing the overall ignition of a next chapter in Wolcott's story as a community. There's a lot of other things happening there, and actually next month we're going to be finalizing some work to convey land for an affordable housing unit by Green Mountain Habitat too. So anyway, one little microcosm of action. I think on a more somber note, I think on sort of federal headlines and impacts, I'll just add a couple other dimensions that we're seeing. Actually, it's not entirely somber, but the Green Mountain National Forest has undergone like a pretty profound capacity contraction, with sort of buyout programs being accepted by staff and other measures. As a result, they are not doing any new land acquisition, sort of at the present moment. This is sort of more central Vermont focused. We've identified a couple of opportunities for conservation activity that might have been a good fit for the Green Mountain National Forest. And I really have to, this is the not so somber part, pay my compliments to various agents or departments within ANR who have looked at opportunities really strategically to say, are these fits for the state? And there's been a willingness to step in on sort of generationally significant opportunities to do conservation work that the federal sort of vacuum may have created a lost opportunity. But so FPR, Fish and Wildlife, just really appreciating those partnerships. And I think I might just leave it at that. Looking forward to, finding ways to advocate on behalf of these issues next year in the legislative session.
Awesome.
Jackie, I can quickly share.
Oh,
I just
go
wanted
ahead,
to.
Becca.
I feel like maybe rounding out a little bit to pivot us into maybe the next conversation, but also to set the table for the coming year. We did a ton of work this past year. Jackie covered the volumes of outreach and things that were developed throughout the past year, largely due to this engine, the steering committee. And it's really cool to be thinking about the fact that we're poised with the impact areas, Move Forward Together Vermont's priorities, all of the work that took place to understand from our stakeholders where us as a steering committee and a program should be headed next. And it gives me great joy to be thinking that we are truly set up to have the kind of year that, in the words of one of the candidates that we've put forward to the governor for consideration for the steering committee, she said, so, what does this group steer anyway? And I was really excited to be able to share with her that through the Move Forward Together Vermont work, through the efforts we did to develop the sort of foundational document that describes the way that we want to promote the outdoor rec economy, that we are positioned to do a lot of great work in 2026. It's exciting. So thank you. Oops, you're muted now, Jackie.
Oops. Thank you to all of you. Wow, it's so amazing to hear all of the highlights that you had, and also some helpful feedback on things that we can be thinking about, and in a lot of cases have already been thinking about. And I wanted, before we sort of wrap up our conversation and move on to, sort of some program updates, I really just want to focus in a little bit more on, as Becca was alluding to, the steering committee, your role, what you need to feel supported by me as the program manager, but also involved in the decision making that we're doing as a program. And so if I did drop the list that I proposed earlier in the chat, and as I'm wrapping up the end of the year and getting ready to put meetings on your calendars, refine the VOREC action plan, think about my work in 2026, I really want to benefit from your thoughts on our meeting cadence, communications, those kinds of things. So I'd love to have a quick conversation about that and capture any thoughts you have as you reflect on this last year. We put a lot of effort into restructuring our meetings. This year, we narrowed our in-person meetings down to two, one being the work plan meeting at the beginning of the year, and then a mid-year in-person meeting. And then for the most part, we switched to these bi-monthly business meetings where you have an opportunity to report out on the things that you're seeing in your respective areas of the outdoor recreation economy. And then closing with this sort of year in review, an opportunity to reflect. We also really supported heavily during the legislative session, and I prioritized getting you updates on what was happening during the legislative session, what things we were noticing, what our partners were noticing. So I just want to know from all of you, how that went, what things should VOREC do more of in 2026? And what things should VOREC maybe do less of in the next year? Go ahead, Shelby.
I have a thought that related a bit to the discussion around the community grant program. I think that there's probably a lot of support among steering committee members that that's like a fantastic vessel. The systems have been built to sort of do it effectively. Like, it's not reinventing the wheel. Like, this thing exists. And I think that there's like a very stark reality in the state house, given federal funding trends, that the state is being asked to step into every deficit right now from every corner of the public services landscape. And so I'm kind of wondering if there is room to have candid conversation about how the grant program can be elevated in light of that, and what the real constraints are to the department and the agency really like going to bat for that relative to other things, so that we can be educated on the landscape that you all are managing, this FPR staff and beyond, and Heather and Becca, you as co-chairs here. And so that we're not exerting undue pressure on you all to advocate for something when it's just not realistic. So that's a suggestion on just a very narrow piece of the broader puzzle.
I think that's really helpful, Shelby. And for what it's worth, we put in we include VOREC in the budget every year, and the budget goes through a review process internally. And most of the time, we don't know what it's going to look like until the governor gives his address. We know what his priorities are, and we do our best to try and figure out how to align what we're proposing with those priorities. In the past year, it was a little bit difficult for us to draw very direct connections to his priorities when he was hearing from residents that they needed to pay down the tax burden and address the housing crisis. So we continue to do the work to create the opportunity for the conversation at the legislature and with the administration. I think it always makes a bigger impact when the legislators and the administration are hearing from people that can tell the story of how impactful the work is. And I think there are 5+ grantees on this call. You all have amazing power to tell story right now. And I think harnessing that power and doing that will only help. I can't imagine it hurting. So I appreciate you asking that question, and I think it's a good one for us to figure out the different ways that we can collaborate to uplift the benefits of this grant program.
Go ahead, Sarah.
So I think, I would just like to say thank you, Jackie, for posing this question. And, and I personally really have enjoyed the cadence of the meetings. The legislative updates last year were incredibly helpful. I think the content and facilitation is great, as well as the communication. But the one thing that I do feel like I could use as a VOREC steering committee member, somebody who is also just sort of in year one, and just observing that there are, the steering committee of VOREC is changing, is perhaps some, more, I don't want to say team building exactly, but just a better understanding of who we're working with here, and who may be joining the VOREC steering committee. But I also have been looking for opportunities to get myself out more into communities that I am not familiar with entirely in terms of their outdoor recreation assets or goals. And so I love the opportunity to go out earlier this summer to some ribbon cuttings, and I appreciate that. But I think that maybe, if there's any way to bring together sort of folks that are doing the work on a local level or on the ground or through, private or public sectors would be really helpful for this committee to try to look for more of those types of opportunities.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. I'll think on that. Carrie.
Kind of following on that a little bit, what I was thinking about in terms of what could be done. I know that nobody wants to hear, here's some technical support. We don't have any money, but knowing that we may not have any money and that we've made huge investments in all of the tools that you referred to in your presentation. And I was a kind of not a very active part of the committee that put together the core toolkit, but I've been following it closely, and it's an incredible resource. And I know that there are more of those. When I go around Vermont in general, the communities along the Northern Forest Canoe Trail specifically, and then kind of when I generally think about the VOREC steering committee and economic development around outdoor recreation, I feel like we need to continue to support communities coming together as communities, including the downtown core, the outdoor recreation community, and continue to specifically target and market and respond to any community that wants to come up with a plan or build their resources or understand what their potential is, like figuring out how to continue to engage this process. I think so many were inspired by the VOREC funding, but I don't think that it has to stop even if there isn't a ton of funding, because we now have tons of resources, and I'm sure let's let Heather talk on that front.
Well, I'm sorry, Carrie, you just inspired me. Like, I just kind of want to bring together both what you were saying and what Shelby brought up, just in terms of like, to your point that you started with, Shelby, like, yeah, money is tight, right? That there's no doubt about it. So I think for me, the question is one, to acknowledge, I know we probably all say this all the time, but like, I cannot stress enough how important it is to have a relationship with your local legislators. Like, at the end of the day, they are the ones who are making the decision. They are voting on these funding decisions. And then, so how do you get them to understand? And I think this goes back to what you were saying, Carrie, is like, make sure they understand what has been happening on the local level and being able to make the connection between whether it's the issues they're going to be hearing about every day at the State House about property taxes, healthcare, education, whatever it is. It's like, we need to understand that we can't just think about advancing our own agenda. We have to think about how we can help other people advance their agenda and where we fit in. And so helping them understand what an impact these projects have on the local level, on your local community, where they dovetail with other things that they're hearing all day, every day. I think that's really the sweet spot that we have to kind of like try to focus in on, so that it's really about how the people who are going to get the chance to vote understand how that's going to impact us. And so it's not just like, we want more money for this one thing that's really important to us, but this is really what will help the whole community thrive, and then help all these other, big picture kind of priorities advance, hopefully.
Well said, Heather.
Agreed.
And I'll just add that by saying that doesn't mean that I don't know how difficult it is to get your local legislators to really focus or even find the time, or, so I'm not going to be the one to say that that's like, oh, check, let's just do that.
Yeah, and I am curious, from, as we keep thinking about that, as we keep talking about that, like, what things can VOREC or my capacity do to help you in making those connections? We do sit inside state government, but there may be informational resources or talking points. We've thought about, like, what is VOREC's role in policy given where we sit? How can we use that sort of position to help help you as you look to connect with legislators. So just a plug to think on. Carrie.
Sorry, have a lot to say apparently. I was reminded when Heather was talking and kind of thinking about tying it in with me. We did a lot of outreach through the Move Forward Together Vermont process to connect with regional planning commissions. They are also obviously underfunded, understaffed. However, if we can't come up with funds that will support individual towns, what kind of resources might be available through planning commissions to bring these toolkits out into communities who might want them? Is there a smaller amount of funding that could be effectively deployed through more of a regional thought process or opportunity? I just sort of thinking about, even if we can't have a full VOREC steering committee, or sorry, VOREC community grants program, how can we mobilize a certain amount of resources to keep communities thinking about outdoor recreation and how they can meet that opportunity?
It's fun. One of the original goals of the pilot, when we first did this as a pilot with $100,000, is it funny to think about? One of the ideas we had was let's carry the water back to as many communities as possible by making it an explicit outcome of those grants that those deliverables become tools for other communities to use. So I like the idea of sort of reinvigorating that as a concept. And since then, we've developed, like, the core toolkit is explicitly intended to help in those ways. So I think bringing that emphasis back to how we share what has been learned and invested in over time is a great idea.
Any last thoughts? I found those ideas very helpful, and I really appreciate you guys leaning in and having the conversation. I will send that feedback form out over email just in case, this conversation sparked additional feedback for you, or you didn't feel comfortable sharing anything in this space but want to write it down in a feedback form. No pressure. I know time is limited, but I always appreciate the feedback, and I take that into consideration as I'm thinking about things like my work plan, and right now in particular, the VOREC action plan. So thank you again for your thoughts there. I am going to touch very quickly on some program updates and invite Becca and Heather to share updates from the agency point of view, if that wasn't captured in the discussion we just had. Mainly, I think the update from the program perspective is on recruitment. And you all mentioned and know that we've been recruiting for new steering committee members. Becca dropped in the chat that we have more voices coming soon and mentioned, alluded to a conversation she had. We're really excited about the folks that we've shared with the governor's office. There's 4 recommendations that we've made at this point, and we're just waiting to hear back from the governor's office about the appointment of those 4 folks. And then we'll be working really hard to bring them on board and get them into our meetings. And hopefully you'll get to meet them all in February. And my plan is to announce those folks to you as soon as we hear back from the governor's office that they've been appointed. So apologies for the sort of lack of communication on who those folks might be, but we do feel like they're governor appointed positions and the governor has the last say on this. So we're really excited, and more to come soon on that. And Becca or Heather, I don't know if I'd invite you to share anything else on your mind about recruitment as well.
It's ongoing. I think you made a note somewhere I saw that we continue to have spaces to recruit for, which is healthy. We've largely had complete turnover of the founding membership, and we have some of you that have been with us for most of the ride. So it's great to see new voices joining those that have been part of this for so long. And I think what we can all be thankful for is how robust the list is to draw from based on all of the suggestions that y'all made when we were looking at those 4 vacancies earlier this year. So excited to bring those folks on board as soon as we get the green light from the governor.
Yeah, and for Eva's benefit, I will say we did try and bring in more folks from the for-profit world to fill some of that gap that we know exists from our previous conversations. Shelby.
Well, yeah, building on that, were there particular dedicated seats that you were filling and then some more general at large? And if so, what were those? I know you talked about it before, so forgive me for not remembering.
Yeah, they are also listed on the VOREC website, the seats that are open, but we had turnover in a number of our outdoor industry positions earlier this year. We also had an outdoor recreation nonprofit position open up and our one of our member at large positions as well.
Great, thanks.
Great. All right. I also just wanted to share, and you heard this in my presentation, that we did do the implementation session at the Vermont Outdoor Economy Conference. We had over 50 people, I want to say, or about 50 people in attendance at that workshop, and there was tons of excitement. People were really excited about the project list that we had them weighing in on. I had great feedback afterwards about that opportunity. So I really wanted to give a big thank you to Fraser, Eva, and Carrie for helping me do that presentation. I thought it went really well. And like I said earlier, the results of those implementation sessions I'm using to feed the VOREC action plan. And you all will get more of insight into that when we meet in February. Great. Becker, Heather, any other agency updates that you all would like to share?
I had a handful, but I don't know what we have for time.
So we have a few more minutes, and I was going to open it up to Kelly as well in case she wanted to share anything from the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance. And then I was going to open it up to folks listening in for any comments they might have.
In that case, maybe I will take a bye so that others can talk, unless, of course, there's specific questions that folks want to ask of me or Claire from the FPR side of things.
And I'll maybe just mention one quick update, Jackie, to Becca's point in the interest of time. Another project coming up that we're excited about is, and this is, within our destination management plan, but we're going to be exploring another partnership with Leave No Trace. So I had mentioned sort of like a visitor code of conduct. We'd also worked with Leave No Trace on one of our videos that we did kind of 2 summers ago. And so it's sort of part of our licensing to be able to keep using their brand. So they are going to be developing 7 Leave No Trace principles specifically for the state of Vermont. This is something they reserve just for state tourism agencies. But as we try and think through, I know that we're, lots of organizations have worked with Leave No Trace in the state, but as we kind of like think about what does that mean for Vermont? How can we learn from other people's partnerships with them or within that space? We're figuring out that scope of work now, but I'm hoping that we can make space to really pick all the brains of this group and others to understand, like, what can we do? Like I just said, how does that build on what other people are doing in that kind of space? So I'm just hoping that folks will sort of stay tuned as we figure out what that looks like, but excited about that to come in the next year.
Thanks, Heather. right, Kelly, I'm going to open the floor up for you in case there's any updates you want to share from the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance.
I'll keep it very brief. I just wanted to flag Outdoor Recreation Day at the State House on February 5th. We're excited to host our 3rd annual event, or call it our 5th if we include the 2 Tourism Day at the State House events that we were involved in prior to that. So really, we're excited about getting people back into the building to build relationships with their legislators, to talk about the outdoor recreation community and economy and what those public investments have been successful, as well as what new needs and opportunities we have to continue investing in the sector. So sign up. We have an Eventbrite. We are doing a pre-event webinar the week before to review some of the issues that are part of the conversation or that are part of the priority agendas from some of the nonprofit organizations that are involved in the State House. So that should be a great way to bring those stories to our lawmakers that day. I just would love to appreciate the agencies that we've worked with this year, including VOREC, including Forest Parks and Rec, including Vermont Department of Tourism and Marketing, that all of those partnerships have been very helpful for us investing in the VOBA network and in the outcomes in the outdoor economy space. And we pulled together our annual report in time for the Outdoor Economy Summit in November. And it was even shocking to us to see how many people we were able to engage over the year. And a lot of that was in sync with the Move Forward Together Vermont priority issues. A lot of that was in partnership with collaborations or collaborators in VOREC and within the outdoor community. So it felt like we really were able to level up and do a lot of work. We had 23 professional development trainings benefit 115 businesses and involve 148 people. That's just our workforce projects alone that started with the VOREC pilot and then led into the EDA TTOR support over the last 2 years. And we had the 5 events leading up to the summit last fall that was supported by the NBRC grant and working in partnership with VOREC. And that was really positive. We had 618 attendees at all of our events last year. So we just know we're creating this movement on the ground and tapping all of the success stories and needs in the outdoor industry, and just wanted to appreciate those connections and the funding and the grant opportunities that make that work possible. So thanks. That's all.
Thanks, Kelly. Claire, I saw you just dropped a couple things in the chat. Anything you want to chime in and share before I turn it over to other folks? Okay, great. Head over to the chat to see what Claire shared. All right, so I know we have a couple of people who aren't on the steering committee who have been listening in. I think maybe a couple of people dropped off. Not to name names, but Christy, maybe that's just you at this point. No pressure, but if you have any thoughts or things you'd like to share, I welcome you to come off mute and share them.
Thanks, Jackie, and sorry I was late to the party. Elizabeth, I think, got the front end of the meeting, and then we did a baton passing, and here I am. Great to see you all this morning, and continue in our shared work across this area. I wanted to call out, and Jackie and I connected earlier this week, that the NBRC awards were announced on Monday, which called out investments into 2 additional sort of outdoor rec focused community efforts, one in Essex County and one in Lamoille County. And, you know, I agree with the sentiment that, you know, I think the word on the street is prepare for a haircut, you know, with all of our collective budgets moving into the 2026 competition year. But, you know, obviously this is an area, especially in the infrastructure space, where the governor continues to place, you know, federal funding that we have access to. So it's not all grim, but you know, we know that we're going to have sort of less resources moving into 2026. So we need to continue to hone in on, you know, those shared priorities and look for ways that those impacts can be as transformational as possible, even if they're smaller dollar amounts that we have available. I'm happy to answer any questions on the MBRC tools as well.
Any questions for Christy?
Maybe as a final call out, I would say I love the sentiment of the whole idea of recipe sharing. It is a topic that I continue to talk about in all these spaces because if we don't have access to money to make it happen, how can we learn from others that have accomplished things, even if resources are tight? And I think that if we can replicate a success and from one county to the next, it sort of had this ripple effect statewide. And so I encourage that communication to continue. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy. Thanks for being here too and listening in. All right. Well, I think, oh, go ahead, Abby.
Sorry, this is 2 seconds. Christy just totally made my light bulbs go off. Another theme that kind of emerged on the NEK Together conference was with the shift in federal funding, it might be some sort of blessing in disguise where there's, I don't want to say the word forced, but we'll be looking to not only learn from each other, but also work and collaborate with each other. So instead of having 2 separate goals, maybe it's like one bigger goal with multiple partners at the table striving towards the same thing. So just positive with Christy. Yeah. Opportunities.
Thanks, Abby. I love that thought. Shelby.
I similarly was prompted with a question that's much more brass tacks, but I was curious with the toolkit outreach, if there are like student and academic matchmaking partnerships in place that would help extend capacity for municipalities that might want to do it, but don't know how to get started. There's probably a broader outreach strategy that you could brief us on at some point, or we could look into, but that just occurred to me as it might help overcome a stumbling block and be a good learning opportunity for business students or public policy students.
I love that thought, Shelby. And it's something that Chris Campany was on our toolkit working or advisory work group. And he, I know in Windham County, has used a lot of partnerships with educational institutions to roll out some resources for the Windham region. He also brought that up. And we are pulling together our launch strategy and sort of thinking about how to support the implementation or like the use of the toolkit. So that's definitely something I'm going to keep in mind as we build out those plans. I'm happy to report back to you all on those plans too, once we have a better sense of what that is. Kelly, last thought. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, it will be really quick. It's more a heads up because my update focused on 2025, but we're really excited to be launching a new partnership just this week that involves VOREC and other departments on a climate outdoor workforce initiative. We're working with the Department of Labor and the Climate Action Office on identifying pathways and doing professional development and marketing initiatives around climate-ready jobs in the outdoor sector. And it will involve the Office of Workforce Strategy and Development, VOREC, and those departments and offices. So we're really excited about this and would love to work with any or all of you on the project. Look for information coming out to see how you can get involved in the next year.
Awesome, Kelly. Great last thought. I'm really excited about that project too. All right. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking an extra half an hour to do some reflection and thinking forward. I hope you all have beautiful holidays with your family and friends and a great end of the year. And I will be in touch to get those meetings for next year on your calendars ASAP. And I'll see you in 2026. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the snow globe outside.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.